we're going to make today. So we're making a two-player tank shooting game. It's not a networked multiplayer game, so don't be confused by that. We will be releasing a version of the game tomorrow that has Unity stuff built into it, multiplayer features built into it. But this is all about two players on one keyboard. So we're going to build this game throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, we're going to get together and have a bit of a battle. Okay, so many of you will see that there's a completed scene loaded. If it's not what you're seeing, don't worry about it at all. We're going to start by making a new scene in a moment. What I would like you to do, or suggest that you do if you're hoping to see exactly what we're seeing on the screens, is to use the same layout that we're using. So what I'm going to get you guys to do is to click on the layout drop down in the top right and choose 2x3. Then what I'm going to do is to grab my project panel and drag and drop that by grabbing the tab at the top and drop it below the hierarchy. Looking at a layout that's something like this. So if you're unfamiliar with Unity, then you can drag these windows around, you can reorder them, you can dock tabs, but hopefully everybody's familiar with that, having watched the beginner tutorials that we sent you via email. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is to set my project panel to a list style view by dragging the slider at the bottom here. If you drag it all the way to the left, you will get a list view. So that's our editor set up. By the way, if I'm going too fast, just shout at me, I'll slow down. Okay? We're going to start from scratch. So if you go to File, New Scene, Command N on Mac, Control N on PC, and then first thing we're going to do before we start losing work or doing work is to save it somewhere. So you go File, Save Scene As, and you'll find a Scenes folder. And we're just going to call this Main. Save it in there. Then what we're going to do is to remove the directional light. So whenever you make a new empty scene in Unity, you get two things. You get a main camera and you get a directional light. So it's kind of set up so that you can just drag some artwork in there and it's going to look nice. We've got our lighting set up in our level prefab, so we don't need that. So select the directional light in the hierarchy here, just delete it. So Command Backspace on Mac, delete on PC. Then, what I want you to do is look in the prefabs folder in the project. What you should see is that you've got a number of prefabs in there. One of those is called Level Art, and if you select it, it should look something like this. So it's a little game board with all of the stuff set up. So the reason we're giving this to you ready-made, or prefabbed as we call it, is that we didn't want you guys to have to go through a whole system of setting up colliders and all of this different stuff. We thought we would just get it all ready and then actually go about making the game. So I'm going to grab my level art prefab and just drop it onto the hierarchy. Then what you'll see is that that's populated in the scene view, and you can see part of it in the game view as well. Now what you'll notice at this point is that there's a blue progress bar starting down at the bottom. So we want to change some settings for that. What that's doing is telling us about lighting, and it's starting to create a lighting bake. So I want you to go to Window and Lighting.
If you drop the level art pre
for that. What that's doing is telling us about lighting, and it's starting to create a lighting bake. So I want you to go to Window and Lighting.
If you drop the level art prefab into the scene, that'll instantiate it as well, but it won't position it at the origin, so if you've done that, don't worry about it, just put it back at the origin by changing the position to 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the level art should be at 0, 0, 0 if you've dragged it into the hierarchy. If you randomly dropped it into the scene view, it might be at a slightly different position. Just set those all back to 0 in the transform component here. Transform, position, 0, 0, 0. Okay, so the lighting panel. First thing to do is to uncheck Auto at the bottom of the lighting panel. So what Auto is there to do is basically to allow you to be lighting and moving around geometry that's going to stay still. Okay, so if we were designing this level and we wanted to kind of incrementally bake whenever we move something around it or rebake the shadows, etc., then we'd leave that set up. But we've already done that for you. So what we're going to do instead is uncheck that, and then we're going to give you some settings to put in. So first thing I'm going to do is remove baked GI. So we don't want any baked lighting for this. We're going to use real-time lighting so that when we're firing the shells around, they've all got lights on and they're going to light up the scene for us. So we're going to use that pre-computed real-time GI, but we don't want it at a real-time resolution of 2. We're going to set that to 0.5. So this is kind of sort of low poly style artwork. No offense, Pete, it's beautiful, well done. So we don't need immensely high res for the lighting there. We can get away with a 0.5 instead. Then one other thing we need to do is to change our ambient lighting. So in Unity, lighting can come from all the different lights that you put in there. So we had a directional light, and we have a directional light in this scene. It's attached to this, so you can see here, directional light. But you can also get ambient contribution, and ambient is basically just the lighting that's applied either by a skybox or by a color or gradient. And we're just going to set this to a color. To introduce you to briefly is that when I switch back to the slides, we're going to have a quick recap of what we've done, okay? So we've skipped through a few basic steps, but what we'll also do is when we get into the more detailed stuff, we'll keep going back to the slides. And the slides also have references things. So you can see here we have ambient color, and that's what we're going to do next. And you can see I'm asking you guys to set it to 726213, but what does it mean? So ambient or set to color, which looks like this. So this color box as RGB values. If you click here, it will change to different values, but you want to make sure you're on RGB. And the reference is there, 72 for red, green 62, and 113 for blue. This system of showing you these different references is going to be the same for X, Y, and Z, so they're presented by red, green, and blue as well. So if you see those for color and also for position or rotations, don't confuse, that's fine. Okay, so back to the editor. We put in this kind of purpley color in ambient, and that's fine. And then right at the bottom of that panel, we're just going to click build. So build will bake your lighting, and you'll see at the bottom. If you've just opened Unity for the first time, or just installed this version for the first time, then it might take a little bit longer to bake. Doesn't matter, because we're going to do it in the background, and we can carry on with the work that we're doing. So next thing we do is to set up our camera. So the position of the camera currently, I can see, is kind of looking at some of the buildings. It's embedded down here. So this is kind of default position that cameras always are, which is at 0, 1, minus 10 in the world. So it's kind of away from 0, so you can look at something if you put it in at 0. So we're going to start by just repositioning that. So I'm going to set the position in the transform component to minus 43. 42 minus 25. Now I'm going to take this to 40, 40, 60, 0. Okay, and then the final thing we're going to do there is to set it to orthographic projection. So, as I promised, we're going to do these recaps. So, in the inspector panel, we're setting the position of the camera to -43, 42, -25. Change the rotation to 40, 60, and 0. We're changing the projection to orthographic, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. Okay, so what you'll notice is that when we've projection from perspective to orthographic, you now have this strange-looking flattened view. And we're going to talk more about that in the specific section on cameras later on. But just to briefly explain, the difference between projection and orthographic is there's no change in scale over distance. I've got some diagrams to explain that a bit better. But what you need to know going in is that size is what changes effectively the zoom. So as I drag my size value, I'm effectively zooming in and out. We want you to do this, but just an example. Then last thing that we're going to do, as you notice when I zoom out here, sorry, wrong way around. When I zoom out, I can see my strange gradient skybox in the background. And because our camera will pan out when our tanks move far apart, we need to have a background color set up in there. What I'll do is to change my clear flats on the camera component from skybox to solid color. And then I'm going to choose a color for the background. So this is just going to be kind of a brown, which is the desert, and the RGB reference for that is going to be 80. and 50. If you want to choose your own brown, you're a big fan of brown, then pick your brown. We're just going to put in that RGB reference, and then what we'll see when we do go over the edges, it looks like that. So it fits the Like I said, don't change size value, that's not important. So to recap, we changed our clear flags from skybox to solid color, so the background, so what renders behind all the geometry in the scene is changing to a particular color. Change that color to T650. And finally, we're going to save our scene. So I'm going to get you to save all the time. It's just a good habit, Control or Command S on a Mac, updating your scene. So the next thing to go and do is to create our tank and its controls. So as with the level up, we've created the arc for you. This time we're going to give it to you prefabbed. We're going to start with the model and build up all the components that you need.